Won't let me.
Speaker though, would it be the microphone?
It's now. You have a way to ask.
Dan Coyle, can you hear us now? Send me a text.
Audio is now coming through.
Great.
It is coming through.
It is coming through now?
Did you
Yes.
say?
Yes, just now.
Oh,
Okay, great. So y'all can hear us, right?
Yes.
Neat.
And who was that talking?
This is Monique Spike from PFMS.
Okay, great. She's authorized to speak, so, okay,
ready for me to continue?
go ahead.
Thanks.
I was just halfway through the recruitment and hiring update, and I was talking about us working on a risk reduction officer recruitment, which should be open within the next few weeks, as well as our firefighter recruitment. So efforts related to firefighter recruitment will be significant on our outreach efforts, and we're super excited to move that forward. Other items going on, continuing conversations related to county dispatch services that we chatted about with the board at our last meeting, and that's just the ongoing ask from the county to recover more of their costs for what they're considering subsidizing of fire, EMS, and law enforcement dispatch services. Director Crawley and I, which is on there, I'll tie into that now, met with county CEO Mike Callaghy last Thursday, mostly to talk about what his proposal was, just discuss some ideas. I think the next step with us is Director Crawley, myself, and Director Bernstein will meet up as part of that ad hoc committee that was formed for these for the purpose of this. We had a meeting also on, I believe it was Wednesday or Thursday, with all of the affected city managers and fire district chiefs. Just a brainstorming meeting. There wasn't a whole lot, well, there wasn't anything decided there, but it was just, again, a discussion about what the county's proposing. The general discussion was about elevating it to a level of a political nature and trying to get some of the electeds involved, so they could maybe perhaps have some influence. But I think the general position is that nobody's really interested in paying a significant amount more for this dispatch services. We had that volunteer event at the Ecumenical Hunger Program, was a employee sponsored event. We're doing that as part of our connecting with our community and employee engagement, and also to a degree some team building. For those that don't know, the Ecumenical Hunger Program is located right across from our warehouse in East Palo Alto. Really a neat facility. They feed the hungry and disadvantaged and also clothe them. And we went down there for a couple hours and helped do a variety of things, pack lunches, clean up, organize, sort, and but it was just, impactful, empowering. And I think everyone appreciated seeing, the Menlo Park Fire District down there helping out in their community. So it was a good experience that we plan on repeating. Mental health open mic at the Menlo Park Library. This was something I became aware of through Director Crawley, and I attended that, I think it was 2 Mondays ago. And they just, they had a forum, and it was kind of a poetry, I'll call it kind of a poetry read or a poetry slam, just about, to heighten awareness around mental health. I got up and spoke a little bit just about some of the issues we're pushing forward this year for mental health, and also just trying to help normalize it, so to speak, and that even firefighters do have this, outside, you know, you're right, yeah, that we're human too, and we all can. So it was a neat program to attend. And then I have the radio training on there. I just wanted to share with you my experience. We're in the process of putting our new radios into service. I attended the training in this room that Mike Stahl was presenting. First of all, Mike Stahl's presentation was amazing, but really what I wanted to do was just share some feedback from the field and also thank the board for supporting the upgrades on our radios. I think we went to the board with that probably about 10 months, 8-10 months ago. And the board was supportive of improving safety with our firefighters. And I would just say that the rank and file folks out there are really just excited to have next generation communications technology where we can communicate with Fremont and Palo Alto on the digital frequencies and still use VHF radio here locally. And it's just and it's a ruggedized radio that will be safe from fires too. So anyway, thank you to the board on that. 2 incidents, even though I just have one listed, another one I'll add. 2 incidents that we've had since our last board meeting. Both were structure fires. One on White Oak Way with a kitchen fire that extended into the attic. That's on April 26th. Structural damage of about 315,000, contents damage of 30,000. Property saved was approximately $4 million. The next structure fire was on Lupin in Atherton. That was just last week. That was a detached pool house. The causes are still under investigation on that one. I think the structure was likely almost a total loss because it was a $517,000 structure loss with $28,000 in contents loss. And the saved property is $15 million for the main room. So that is it for my fire chief's report. Open to any questions.
Any questions? Any public comment? I'll take public comment. Okay, great. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
It's been busy. Okay. Item 2 is the public hearings. Conduct the public hearings on the notice to destroy weeds, declaring weeds to be a public nuisance. So I'm gonna open the public hearing. John, do you wanna say here?
This is just a time for, from your past actions, we sent out letters to everybody that we determined had potential for weeds that could be a hazard to the community upon the declaration. So this is a time for anybody that has any objections to us having that. They can do that at this time, and then afterwards we'll close the public hearing and take our next action.
I'll open it up to public comments right now. If there are any public comments, this is your time to make them for this item.
Approximately how many letters went out? I believe it was 111, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, based on
I might be
spread.
off the last one.
Yeah.
And there are no public comments?
Chuck, any comments from directors? And then we'll close the public hearing.
Okay, and now before you is a resolution that we seek for you to approve, and this resolution then allows us to go out and survey the properties. Anybody that has not abated them as of June 1st. The fire district has a approved vendor, a contractor that will go out and abate those properties pursuant to that resolution, and then we will seek to recoup that cost per our district fee schedule, and that will be assessed onto each parcel's property taxes, which we will do immediately. So this resolution allows us to do that.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I just have a question.
Okay, well, let's get a motion to approve the resolution. We'll open it up.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
okay, quick discussion, Chuck.
Are we allowed by law to add on to the actual cost of cutting the weeds, a fee, an administrative fee for the time it takes you to write up all this stuff and collect the information and so forth?
Yes, and that is included in our fee schedule and is added on to each fee.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? We'll take public comment again. Won't be any public comments. Okay, roll call, please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
John. Okay, we go to the consent calendar. Does anyone want to remove any items? Okay, Chuck.
I'd like to, pull off item number 5, please.
Okay.
I'd like to pull off item 4.
Okay, so, is there a motion to adopt a resolution approving the master pay schedule for August employees as the only item on the consent calendar?
Move.
Second.
Any comments, questions? Public comment on the consent calendar? Okay, roll call please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye. The consent calendar passes for item number 6. So why don't we go to item 4? Chuck, you wanted to, or no, I'm sorry, Rob, you wanted to remove number 4?
Yes, under the May 2nd notes in the regular agenda, item number 1,
The page 15.
page 15. Where it's paraphrased relative to my statement for the non-nomination of our board president. I'd like to add the government code section as an attachment to item number 1.
You mean the actual 12.519, that section or new?
The government code section 12.519.
Okay, as an attachment to it? You have, okay, great.
Thank you, that's
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Well, basically, the April 18th, special and regular board meeting, and the May 2nd, 2023 special board meeting.
Can you, can you say that again, Director Crawley? You have all 3 there. Is that
I
what?
know, so
Yeah,
is there a motion to, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's one item.
yeah, thank you.
Right, so.
I just
the
wanted to
motion is
confirm,
To
yeah.
approve item which number 4.
Yeah.
Which is the minutes for April 18th, 2023, the special and regular board meetings, and the May 2nd, 2023 special board meeting.
Yeah.
So Director, will you make the motion? I think Director Jones seconded the motion. Is that right, or did I miss that?
I think Rob, it was an attachment to that be part of the move.
It's, it'll be as amended.
It's
It'll,
already been submitted, yeah, so that's gonna be amended. May 2nd.
and Director Bloom, you did.
I did.
Okay.
Any discussion? Any public comment? Okay, roll call please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries, and we'll go to item 5 on the consent calendar. Chuck, you removed this, but you accept the treasurer's report for the month ended March 31st, 2023 unaudited.
Yes, I had 3 questions. I want to get some clarity on. On page 20 of our packet. This is the capital improvement projects budget. I just was curious, given that we've got kind of a surplus coming into our general fund. Why did we transfer in $2.8 million?
Oh, the $2.8 million was part of the budget for this fiscal year, which we actually transferred at the beginning of the year. So when we did the budget, or when the budget was done, I think a year ago, part of the budget was this $2.8 million excess between all of the sources of funds versus all of the use of the funds. So the 2.8 million is really the kind of like the balancing figure in a way. So that 2.8 million is transferred from the general fund to this.
As a practical matter, does it do anything?
So basically, it's more of, having a balanced strategy in the budget. Because if we don't transfer the excess of 2.8 million, it's just gonna look that we have like an excess revenue that's not parked anywhere. But if we transfer it, it's part of the reserves now for the city.
Okay, and then on page 21. I asked about this at almost every meeting. Let me make sure I understand what's here. This is our special revenue fund. Do I understand that we're estimating that when we finish June, that the feds will still owe us $151,000 plus dollars?
Yes, actually.
And why is it, and no, these are still all for the hurricane and for all that stuff a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, right?
Yes, that's correct. So for the special revenue fund, for clarification, we actually have like sub funds on this in special revenue fund, so we tap it separately as well. So four of the funds are actually for the user agreements, which is in the cooperative agreements. So basically that one, we basically just like, receive it. There's like the time difference, basically on a 1 month lag, if you may say, right? But this 151,000 again is, you're correct in saying that this is due to, those, previous claims that, we had for, the hurricanes and the pandemic. But I think I do have an update on that. I think the 29,000 and then 197,000, so we total of roughly 200 something thousand was already recovered from the 377,000 beginning balance. And as of April, I know it's as of March. As of April, we also received like about $62,000 for the pandemic claims. So we're actually already fully reimbursed for the pandemic COVID claims that we have. So we're really just waiting for the dollars for the hurricane claims.
I don't ever remember it taking this long to get paid by the government. Can you shed some light about why they're so slow in reimbursing us?
From what I know, because I actually asked our user about that, because they actually coordinate or communicate with the federal government on a regular basis. For some reason, they're still kind of like behind on just kind of like checking or auditing the claims. So that's part of the reason why we're still have a kind of standing balance of this much. And I think it's not really just for us. I think for other agencies as well. I mean, they are actually waiting for like 4 or 5 years worth of claims. But for us, we're slowly recovering it. We're slowly getting reimbursed for that. But I don't know exactly what the timing is. But what I can assure you is they're on track, or not on track, but they're actually, we're constantly following up with them just to make sure we're gonna receive this. Thanks.
And is there any reason to believe that the departure of Amy Trask will somehow hinder us from collecting this money?
No. No.
Okay, then I have one last question. And this is somebody explained this to me once before, but now I no longer can remember.
What page?
I'm looking at both pages 22 and 23. I don't understand how we can have 96 million in cash, but our funds only have 88 million in cash. How do we, and not cash, have 88 million in the funds? How can we have more cash than we have funds?
So that's because the fund balance is really your assets less liabilities. So if if we have like less funding, less fund balance than what we have right now for the cash balance, that means we have like accrued some liabilities. So your assets, let's say your asset is just really your cash technically. If all of your assets are just cash, it's 100 million. But if you have liabilities of 20 million, your fund balance now would be 80 million because the fund balance is really the net of the two. So the cash is really just a part of the fund balance.
So you're saying that the liabilities are netted out of the fund balance before it's totaled? You're not totally in the positives and the negatives, you only have the net.
For the fund balance.
For the fund balance.
Correct.
I see. And is there some generality you can give about that difference of $8 million? What's the nature of it? Is it bills that we haven't paid yet? Is it the fire engines that we got delivered? What?
No, I would say it's related mostly on the payroll liabilities. Because sometimes if we send out like, the contributions that we pay to helpers, all of those, amounts, we actually have like about, I think it's 30 days to actually pay it, from the time we actually submit it, from the pay period. So there's really like differences, between, the expense in itself and then how it's paid. So, those primarily compose, those liabilities, because we actually accrue it, so we can have like an actual or a more accurate, fund balance, basically.
So you've accrued it in the fund balance, which reduces the fund balance, but we still have the cash because we haven't paid it yet.
Correct. That's
Okay, sorry, I know it's a dumb question, but I just couldn't in my mind understand that. Okay, that's my only question. I'll move to approve item number 5 or accept item number 5.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other discussion or questions, public comment? Okay, roll call please, Michelle.
That's gonna be one. Scroll down a little bit to be sure. Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano.
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries. Thank you, Elaine. And now we'll move on to our regular agenda, item number 7, which is to approve a resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute an agreement with PFM Asset Management to provide investment management and advisory services. So Chief and Elaine, you probably want to talk about this. I think the presentation is going to be given.
I'm gonna
now.
turn it over to Elaine, and I know we're gonna get to share with you a couple of our hopefully new funding.
Thank you.
So, good evening again, directors, good evening, everyone. So this is really the culmination of, the RFP process that we initiated back in January. So I think with us here, joining us here is Monique Spike from PFM Asset Management. So she's gonna, present, some information or background about PFM a little bit later. But before I turn into, to Monique, just again, a little bit of background, as at this time, or even historically, our investments are actually only or concentrated basically on LAIF and money market accounts. So basically, it's all cash and cash equivalents. But with the current market environment right now, we're losing money because of that, because of higher interest rates. There's so much opportunity cost that we have foregone already. So we decided with the direction from the board from the finance committee last December, we decided to actually issue an RFP to help for an investment firm to actually help us, manage our portfolio. So we issued the RFP last January 9, 2023, and we received 10 proposals. From the 10 proposals for the initial evaluation, myself, Francine, and the chief reviewed thoroughly, the submissions or the proposals, and from the 10 proposals, we chose the top 3 candidates, which we interviewed together with Director Bloom. As a conclusion, or as a result of the interview process and the initial evaluation, we determined that PFM Asset Management would be the best firm that would address our needs. So we are actually recommending them to be our investment advisor. So some of the things that some of the significant factors that led us to that decision. I think number 1, they demonstrated, or at least PFM demonstrated, the best understanding of the district needs. They actually did the most research in their presentation when we did the interview. It's almost as if they provided early advice and strategies on how to actually handle our cash right now. Also, they actually have the largest AUM or assets under management for public bonds, and they also have the largest presence in California out of all the proposers. In addition, the PFM staff, Monique, Leslie, from the first interview, they demonstrated the ability to actually collaboratively work with staff. So those are just kind of like a few reasons that why we chose them. So now we're bringing it to the board to actually execute a contract with them. So I'm gonna turn it to Monique now, so she can present some background information about PFM and discuss the next steps once the board approves the contract and once we actually sign and execute the contract.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to speak with the board. Please let me know if my volume is not sufficient, and I will aim to speak louder. I'm going to share my screen so you can see the presentation materials, and I also know that it is also in your packet. I'm going to do that right now. Okay, you should all be seeing my screen.
We are.
All right, great.
Thank
Well, I'm going to share a little bit about PFM Asset Management and specifically talk about how we are going to be working with your staff with the goal of optimizing and protecting the district's investment assets. I'll start by talking a little bit about the team that we have assigned to work with the district. My name is Monique Spike. I am a managing director at PFM Asset Management, and my role is to serve as engagement oversight. So essentially, I am responsible for communicating what we're doing for the district and also overseeing the delivery of services by the team. I have been in the industry for 20 years, and I've actually spent those 20 years at PFM Asset Management in a variety of different capacities. Rounding out my team include Wale Kajopai, who has been in this industry for about 14 years. He is going to serve in the role of a project manager, assisting me with various tasks on the district's engagement, including, for example, investment policy reviews, cash flow analyses, etc. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Leslie Murphy has worked with me for the past 13 years. She is our business solutions director, and her role on the engagement is really ensuring that if there are new solutions that we have, that your district team is available and abreast of all of those. And then on the bottom half, I have our portfolio strategies, portfolio management and compliance teams. And these are the folks on my team who are going to ensure that the district's assets are not only optimally invested, but invested in accordance with your investment policy, California Government Code, and other guidelines. One of the things you'll notice about our team is that we all have fairly long tenures in terms of industry experience, and many of us have served with PFM Asset Management for a number of years. So we're a team who work together well. We like to provide district staff with a deep bench. One of the things we pride ourselves on is the ability to be responsive to your needs. Speaking a little bit about the firm's industry experience, we have been providing investment management services to public agencies for the past 42 years. Our business is focused on the public sector. On a national basis, if you take a look at the entire United States, we manage or advise on about $210.2 billion nationwide. Again, most of those assets, certainly more than 95%, are for public agencies like yourself. We focus on customized investment strategies, meaning that our goal is to provide investment management services that are customized to the district's specific needs. We do everything from liquidity, essentially looking at your liquid options, to longer term portfolios in the 1 to 3, 1 to 5, or in some cases, for some of our clients, 1 to 10 years. Because our clients are public agencies, our investment philosophy and mission is consistent with public agency objectives, and that being focusing on the preservation of principal, really having risk management procedures in place. We recognize that, these dollars are very important to our agencies. We're not looking for a lot of risk. We have a lot of policies built around that. Liquidity, making sure the assets are available when you need them. And lastly, looking to provide you with a reasonable rate of return under those constraints. Focusing a little bit more on California, as Elaine mentioned, we do have, I think, the most experience in California managing assets for California public agencies. California is unique in that it has a government code that specifically outlines the types of investments public agencies or defined local agencies in the state can invest in. We manage about $66.9 billion of assets or advise on assets in California specific to those mandates. We are a trusted advisor in the California public finance community. We are regular speakers and educators for the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers, the California Municipal Treasurers Association, and also CDAC. I recently presented at CMTA, which is a big conference for California treasurers recently, and I'm also scheduled to speak at CDAC as well. We also provide and serve on the CMTA Investment Policy Certification Committee. So we have extensive expertise with the California Government Code and investment policies in general. And we also serve on the Investment Policy Certification Committee for the Association of Public Treasurers for the United States and Canada. My office is located in San Francisco. And we also have offices throughout the state in Los Angeles as well. So really wanted to emphasize for you that we really have the expertise necessary to not only manage your assets in a prudent manner, but also to advise your staff in terms of the recent trends in public finance investments and also in the investment policy reviews and other projects that may arise as we continue on in our relationship. In terms of what it looks like on the ground as we transition from an internal management at the district to PFM as an external manager, we thought it would be great just to put some bullet points together for the board. First and foremost, we like our clients to think of us as an extension of staff. And what we mean by that is think of us as your sort of investment department reporting through your finance team. We aim to provide dedicated client service representatives for the district. So, you know, in the event, for example, that I'm here speaking to you at a board meeting or at another board meeting, your staff always has someone available to call who's always at the desk. We have a comprehensive reporting suite and aim to support our clients in meeting their transparency and reporting obligations. So we provide significant support there. And one of the most important things is to know is that we serve as a fiduciary to the district. So we are investing on your behalf as though we are in your seat. We make decisions in your best interest, not our best interest. And another feature rounding out sort of our department or extension of staff is the education we can help provide your team, and also just general thoughts on thought leadership, what's going on in the market. So we really want your team to rely on us and our expertise to help develop your investment program as we move from more, for example, cash-based investments to securities. We would help review the investment policy statement for the district. That's something that we do at the start of every engagement. And what we're generally looking for is we're trying to help evaluate what options are on the table and how they may fit with the district's specific risk tolerances and preferences, and help you make decisions there. We also will, create a process for credit analysis by relying on our process. So you have the confidence that the assets that are in your portfolio are safe. And we maintain compliance with your investment policy, which, as you know, is really important. We take the investment policy guidelines that are approved by the board, and we input those guidelines into our compliant management system. And we report on that compliance to you quarterly, but daily it's also being monitored both through our system and by our separate compliance department. Lastly, what we're trying to deliver to you is we're trying to deliver a strategy, an investment program that's in line with your risk tolerances and return objectives. So essentially balancing where your boundaries are through risk management, through your investment policy statement, and deliver you a portfolio that has a competitive return within those tolerances. We're also looking to help you with some income certainty in the portfolio and reduce reducing income volatility and mitigating any risks that are associated with long-term investments, such as credit risk, interest rate risk, and any cash flow uncertainty. Just a couple of bullet points on how we're going to help you reach your investment objectives. The primary objectives that we see for many California public entities, and certainly for the district, are you're looking for an investment program that delivers safety, liquidity, and return. For safety, we really focus on high quality investments managed both through our credit management process and how we are selecting investments. We provide continuous monitoring of your portfolio holdings. So our portfolio management team, for example, is constantly on the desk in the market monitoring your portfolio holdings. We don't like our portfolio managers to be distracted with other tasks. We simply task them with monitoring the portfolio holdings and making sure that they're able to be responsive to cash flow needs and anything that may be happening in the market. And we have a strong focus on diversification. For liquidity management, we will be working in concert with district staff to perform cash flow analyses to get a sense of what the district's cash flow needs are, and to hopefully come up with an appropriate allocation between what we call liquid or cash investments and securities that can be invested out longer along the yield curve. And that's what we mean by segregation of funds. We also focus on highly liquid investment securities. And what that means is we want to purchase investments for the district's portfolio that has a ready buyer base, meaning that if we ever needed to sell a security earlier than anticipated, we're not locked into illiquid investments where there's no buyer available. And lastly, return. We are an active manager. You know, if we have a portfolio of securities, we're looking for opportunities to add value over and above the holdings. We tend to use the Treasury as our baseline. And so we're looking at investments that provide a good return for their level of risk. And finally, we note disciplined duration management. And what I really mean by that is, you know, if we decide on a strategy, for example, with staff based on your cash flows, that we're looking at investments in the 1 to 3 maturity range, then we want to stick to that maturity range. Unless situations change, circumstances change, but we really want to be disciplined about the approach to deliver long-term returns on your behalf. In terms of what we're doing, I spoke about some of this already, so I won't stay on this slide too long, but we have sort of a 4-point plan to delivering service to the district. One, it all rests on communication and client service. We pride ourselves on transparent, timely communication of what's going on in the market and what's happening in the portfolio. That communication is very important so that your staff knows what's going on and so that they can then report to the board and the board can then report to your stakeholders, which is the district. We also provide comprehensive reporting and fundamental investment education so that your team members can make good decisions and provide oversight of our services. We will do an investment policy review. Again, we do that at the start of every engagement, but we also do that on an annual basis as well. Cash flow analysis to continue to make sure the portfolio is optimally invested between short overnight cash and longer term investment opportunities. And then the strategy development and implementation is what we're doing on an ongoing and continuous basis. We will be meeting with your staff, typically on a quarterly basis, in some cases semi-annually, depending on staff preferences, and meeting with the board periodically to review the portfolio performance and discuss and confirm the strategy that we're implementing on the district's behalf. In terms of timeline, what we're doing now, we've outlined sort of 3 phases for the transition. We're currently working to be ready to get started on an investment policy review and a cash flow analysis, the goal of which is to prepare that investment strategy presentation and our recommendations to staff. Our goal is to get that work significantly in process so that we can then have a meeting with your staff later this month or early June to deliver our recommendations on your program, to discuss the initial strategy, and to really get us all aligned on what we're doing and where we're going. And our plan then, after that is done with the investment policy and the investment strategy, is to come back to the Finance Committee and the Board of Directors in July with the investment policy recommendations and the strategy recommendation for approval. That is all I have in terms of a formal presentation. I will stop sharing and entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions? Could you check?
Yes,
Thanks for meeting.
You're welcome.
my name is Chuck Bernstein. I have a couple of questions. When you invest money for an agency such as ours, do we retain title to those securities and so forth, or are they in your name?
Yeah, that's a great question. PFM Asset Management at no time will take custody of any of your cash or assets. We always work with our clients through a third-party custodial arrangement or safekeeping so that your assets are always in your name, in your account. I always say what we deliver is information. We provide your custodian with information on what to buy and what to sell based on our management, and then we work with your staff on any cash needs.
I have several other questions that relate to the CAMP program that you discussed.
Mm-hmm.
It was an eye-opener to me. Just the first question is, in general, has CAMP always had a higher return than LAIF, or is that just an unusual blip at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great observation. To answer that question, I'm going to give you just a little back of the envelope inside baseball on CAMP and LAIF. LAIF is the state investment pool. And what's important is that LAIF's average life is at this point closer to 9 months. So the average life of that pool is 9 months long, meaning that the securities in LAIF's portfolio in general take about almost a year to mature and turn over. CAMP is a joint powers authority and investment pool that has a weighted average life of about 30 days. And so it only takes 30 days for CAMP's yield or CAMP securities to turn over. And so what's happening right now in the current rate environment, because short-term or overnight rates are so high because of the Fed's activity, CAMP is simply purchasing higher yielding investments more quickly. So CAMP's yield has risen quickly over the past few months as it sort of rode that federal interest rate increases, whereas LAIF has had a harder time catching up just because of the way their portfolio is structured. So that yield relationship between CAMP and LAIF is not always going to be as drastic or dramatic as it is now. It's just that dramatic because of how fast interest rates rose and how quickly CAMP was able to catch up. That said, CAMP and LAIF are both short-term investment vehicles. CAMP and LAIF are very competitive with each other over time. Many of our clients use CAMP. Right now, it's very attractive because of the income, and CAMP also provides some additional ancillary services for public agencies as well that LAIF does not.
That relates to my third question, which
Sure.
I'm kind of impatient about the timetable on this. This is something that I try to encourage the district to look at for perhaps 10 years, and it's taken a very long time. But even your schedule here proposes a 2 or 3 month schedule to look at all these factors, cash flow, and to look at our investment policy and so forth. is there any reason that we couldn't shift our funds from Lathe to camp tomorrow and still have everything we've got right now, except it seems to me, if it's a 2% difference for 3 months, that's 0.5%. That's over $300,000 more in interest that we get over the next 3 months.
Yes, specifically right now with regard to camp, the district's investment policy does not explicitly allow camp as currently written.
It doesn't have to be named specifically, or the type of fund that it is not permitted.
Well, your investment policy specifically lays out authorized investments. And I'm looking at it right now, and it simply does not include that category. It specifically lists another type of JPA.
That's it. So that's over my head at this point. So
So essentially, to move faster, we would either need to separately authorize camp outside of the policy, or review your policy sooner than it's scheduled for your board meeting.
Well, I'd like to urge you to do that, because it certainly makes sense when you're talking about securities and long-term investments and diversification. All that makes sense. But it seems to me that when we're talking about $70 million in cash, that every day we lose, we're losing lots of money, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. So I would urge you to make that the #1 priority. That is, get us to change what's allowed by our policy, and get that extra yield right now, even as we're in essentially a cash environment. I mean, it's still like a cash investment.
Yeah, so Chuck, having been involved in the interview process, the only thing I would add to it is there is a process under which the board definitely wants to look at the investment policy, because they're only going to be investing according to investment policy. Then secondly, I point out that staff still has to execute a contract, assuming we've approved the resolution to do so. And then there is a process at really all investment advisors, and in particular, this one as well, where they have to actually enter all this into their compliance system, which is really critically important to make sure that every investment they're doing, every decision they're making aligns back to our investment policy. So I guess what I'm saying is there is an onboarding process that just takes a period of time. You don't want to take too many shortcuts there, because those open up exposure for us to end up with investments that are not aligned to our policy. So I completely agree with you, your sense of, time is of the essence, because we're obviously it's costing us money by not moving quicker, but we do have to go through the process of executing the contract, onboarding it, and they have to have adequate time to get the rules implemented into their systems.
Well, and I quote, whatever's necessary. It's just not clear to me that it takes 3 months and that we have to review the whole investment policy before moving our cash from one place to another place.
Yeah. And I would tell you, interestingly, further down in the agenda, something the finance committee had worked on is the investment policy as it currently exists. We made a conscious decision in finance committee to just leave it as is, knowing that PFM, once we execute the contract, is going to come back with the language we need to put into it to meet the requirements, so we can do exactly what you're saying, which is invest in camp.
I think if I hear you correctly, that it's better to be lowering costs and not the tax rate, and the dust line in the air, and not really knowing that it's really covered.
That's correct. We want to make sure that we don't shortcut the steps to make sure that the investment advisors investing according to our desires and our policies, and that they have built into their systems, which they have the ability to do, the check and balance to make sure that's actually occurring within their compliance department.
Along that line, Monique, can I ask you a question?
Yes, and I'm having a bit of trouble hearing you.
Okay, I might have to
I'm
stand
gonna
up, shout a little bit. I have a soft voice. But the question is on your, slide number 7, and it talks about communication and client services. My question is, with a lot of the, over the past couple of months, with some of the kind of ups and downs of different institutions that are out there, in terms of going under or mistiming of their investments and, just oversight in of itself, are no longer around. And I think you know the institution I'm talking about that are in that category. When you mentioned about timely communication of portfolio and market information, how often will this communication take place between yourself and, I assume, our finance manager or whomever? What are we talking about, a daily communication? Or are we talking about a monthly communication? Or where the portfolio is? What's the timing?
Yeah.
Or is it
Okay.
too early to kind of get?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So I'll just give a couple of examples. We have a couple of standardized client communications that your staff will receive. For example, we produce a monthly market update, which has our commentary on the market that's produced every month. We also, in some cases, provide a quarterly market commentary, which summarizes the quarter. The special communications that may exist include a number of different things. I'll use some recent examples in the market. During the banking crisis, for example, we provided information on the Silicon Valley Bank failure, on Signature Bank, and our thoughts on that. I then followed up with each of my clients to talk about the fact that their portfolios weren't exposed, to answer questions about the banking industry in general, because a lot of my clients were getting questions from their boards or councils about what was going on in the market. So, you know, that proactive reaching out, one, did you see the communication? 2, rest assured you don't have any exposure. And 3, this is what's going on in the markets in general. This is what you may hear from your bank. These are the topics and the metrics that people may be referring to, so our clients are more knowledgeable. Today, for example, we released a piece on the debt ceiling, just to advise our clients on what the possible scenarios were with regard to potential default of the U.S. Treasury, what we ourselves were doing for our client portfolios in light of that potential default or lack of agreement on the debt ceiling by the U.S. Treasury. You know, our goal is always to ensure that our clients have the information they need to answer to their stakeholders. And so we really try to be as proactive as possible about things going on in the market that may impact our clients' work. On a quarterly basis, when we meet with our clients, we're talking specifically about the strategy that was implemented over the quarter. I personally like to refer back to the initial strategy meeting. So for example, this is the strategy we said we are adopting. This is what we did this quarter to implement that strategy. This is what we expect to do in the next quarter to continue that strategy and have follow up with our clients about that.
You mentioned risk tolerance. And in terms of how do we, what are your perceptions in terms of for an organization like the fire to kind of measure that, they kind of understand to what degree are we talking about when it comes to risk and your ability to be able to manage that for us?
Mm-hmm. So if I understood the question correctly, it's what inputs are we getting to determine what your appropriate risk tolerance is? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the beginning of each engagement, what I like to do, or what we like to do is what we call a portfolio planning survey. And the purpose of the portfolio planning survey is to really unpack what risk means to a certain agency. And the way that I look at that is, starting with the three categories: safety, liquidity, and yield. And I always start with the same questions for each of those. What does safety mean to you? For example, using safety as an example, does that mean you don't want any credit in the portfolio? Does that mean you want to be exposed to certain credits only? Does that mean you want a portfolio that's rated, AAA or AA? Like really unpacking what safety and how safety is defined. For some clients, that may be, well, we care about preservation of principal, period. We use all of that to help come up with a strategy. The same types of questions are used for liquidity. What do you mean by liquidity? Does that mean that you like to have a certain amount of cash in your bank at all times to pay operating expenses? Does that mean that you want to have certain investment types in the portfolio? For example, maybe you don't consider municipal bonds to be a liquid investment type and you don't want exposure to that type of asset class. We really dig into the nuances of each of those three major categories to come up with what the parameters are. And then we use that information to make recommendations on what a strategy may look like, and then provide you with an expectation on what your return will look like given those parameters.
Thank you.
We also have something I learned, which I wasn't aware of, is we have limitations by California code as to what kinds of investments we can do, which in of itself mitigates risk.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of high risk investments out there, but they don't fit the California code for us to be able to invest in.
So growth aspect is what
Yeah.
how we continue that ability to figure out how to finance something.
Yeah, so basically it sounds like, Tony, and thank you so much for your presentation, that once you deal with the survey thing that you had mentioned for our portfolio management, you're gonna align the investment policy based on that, is that correct? And that's where.
Yeah, I'd say the strategy more than the policy. The way we look at investment policies is you want the investment policy itself to be the outside edge of what you're willing to do, right? Everything that's authorized in your investment policy, you should be comfortable with us buying at any point in the process. The investment strategy, on the other hand, is a little bit more fluid. For example, our risk tolerances today may change tomorrow. And as an example of that, for example, in March, when there was a lot of that volatility in the banking sector, we said for a period of time, hey, we're going to pause on financial institutions while we reaffirm, our view on the sector. That was a situation where our risk tolerance shifted for a period of time. And so a lot of this portfolio planning survey is, okay, well, what's the outside edge of where we're comfortable? And as the gentleman mentioned, the California government code in and of itself is already very conservative. So there's not a lot of, outsized risk in the available options in the code. But what we really want to do is we want to take these parameters and then come up with an investment strategy statement to start.
Okay, so that kind of help. I just want to make sure that our investment policy is also kind of aligned with some of the philosophy, just because we're going to have to refer to that sometimes.
Yes.
And that actually is a compliance document as well.
Yes.
Right. So I'm just trying to understand that.
Yep. Absolutely. And there will be some instances, for example, in the policy where we are making recommendations that are more restrictive than California government code, depending on preferences.
Based on the principal preservation philosophy.
Yes. So you will see some of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and I think I know the answer from what you provided us, but I just want to ask it directly. It seems like you've worked hard to express the fact that your relationship or your ownership by US Bank, regardless of that, you're completely insulated in terms of what you're doing from any issues the bank might have with regulatory authorities or bank failure or anything like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we are a wholly owned subsidiary of US Bank Asset Management. And, the bank itself as sort of the parent of the parent of the parent, is a really well capitalized bank. Our part, PFM Asset Management, I think the insulation comes from the fact that you can be comfortable that we ourselves are never in custody of your assets or your cash. You know, we serve as an investment advisor. Your assets are always third-party custodied when we work with you.
Okay, and that was my first question, and that's why I asked, but I just.
Yep.
wanted to be sure.
That's the rule.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, any public comments, Michelle?
I don't see any.
Okay, so, is there a motion to approve this resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute an agreement with PFM Asset Management to provide investment management and advisory services? Is there a second?
I'll take it.
Okay, moved by Director Jones, seconded by Director Bloom. Okay, roll call, please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Corrali.
Aye, so that motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Monique.
Thank you.
Looking forward to working with you.
All right. Looking forward to working with you as well. Enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you.
Indeed. Right, and before we move on, can I just make a quick comment here? Just first of all, thank you for your support in approving our new relationship with PFM Asset Management. I just wanted to take a time to recognize some exceptional work by two people in this
Thank
room.
you.
As Director Bernstein said, he's been asking for this for a decade. Elaine has been here for 7.5 months. And under the direction of Elaine and Francine, they were created the RFP, the level of detail, you know, in going through the RFP process and the initial screening was just exceptional. So, and the end results is what you see here today. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
And then that will keep us posted on any development, right? Elaine, I know you will. Thanks. Okay, item 8, which is to approve by resolution the annual adoption of the district's investment policy and the district treasurer designation for fiscal year 2023-24. Elaine.
Yeah, so basically this was actually met in greatly by Director Bloom earlier. So there's two parts in this, staff report or this recommendation. First is, the adoption of, the investment policy that we currently have right now. And then the second one would be the appointment of the district treasurer. So for the first part, again, as mentioned by Director Bloom, we're basically adopting, our current policy as is. But we know for a fact that, that's going to change once we onboard, the investment advisor, which is different, which was just approved. So that's the first part. So it's almost as if, we're adopting a base, and then once we onboard them, then we're gonna, do the full review of the investment policy and, provide or present those changes for the board's approvals. Then the second part would really be, the appointment of the district treasurer. So for fiscal year 2023-24, it would be the finance manager. So that's yes.
Okay, any discussion? Or is there a motion, actually?
You don't want a motion.
What?
I'll move that we approve the resolution.
Is there a second?
I
Not
thought,
discussion.
okay, I thought we were gonna leave it unchanged.
We are,
That's a
but we
motion.
have to do
We're
the
doing an
annual adoption.
Yeah, we have to do an annual adoption and this is to designate the treasurer, so there's a motion and a second, so discussion.
So if we didn't have a motion, the policy would disappear.
We just wouldn't have a compliant policy.
We wouldn't be in compliance.
Okay, I do have a question, though. I'm just sort of curious how this happens. You probably don't know, and there's no reason you should know. Do you have any knowledge of why our investment policy would have been written such that it would have excluded this camp plan that she refers to?
I'm actually not sure about the history of our investment policy, but technically speaking, if we're talking about California government code versus our investment policy, so if we're in California, basically all of those investments, technically we can adopt or we can actually put in our investment policy because that's allowed. So my assumption may be because, at that time, we're not really interested in, investing in, a JPA account, which is CAM or California Class. So, I mean, that's the only reason that, I can think of. Maybe at that time, we didn't think that, it's applicable for us. Or maybe it just so happened that, we missed that one out or things like that. But other than that, I'm not really sure.
This is one of those things where. What's that? I mean, people who are in the private sector would know about private sector things, and people in the public sector would know about public sector things. But for all these years, despite having the most brilliant financial leadership in all the fire districts in California, no, our leadership never had this even brought up or as an idea. It boggles my mind, and I just wonder why people aren't more curious or more willing to get educated or something. But in any case, I'm very happy that we've got somebody who's looking into these options and has some knowledge and so forth, because we have been missing the boat for a long time. Anyway, I wonder, I mean, for years, I heard about how our financial person was really the top of the line, and yet you find out after the fact that that wasn't really the case. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, Robert?
Alan, on page, item number 13.0, no, 14.0, it's talking about performance standards. And in the second sentence, we talk about the district investment strategy is passive. Given the strategy, the basic needs for the treasurer to determine whether the market yield is being achieved shall be to identify a comparable benchmark to the district portfolio investment duration. So my assumption is, assuming is that we're going to look for some type of return on an annual basis, right? I assume. Is that a false assumption that should be under the think that there's going to be some type of measurable goal that we want to try to achieve with this investment in somewhere where it's whirling annually or like
so
now measure.
Yes, you're correct on that one there. So basically, once we structure our portfolio, let's say, we determine, in communication with PFM, let's say, we're gonna have like a 1 to 3 year investment duration with our portfolio. And that's based on, our risk tolerance, our goals, our plans basically in the future. Then we would have like a certain benchmark, basically like a portfolio benchmark that we would have to, actually compare with our actual returns. So that's when we would know, hey, this is, the benchmark that we set, at the beginning of the investment, implementation of our investment, strategy basically. And then let's say at the end of the year, your benchmark is this much, and then your actual return is this much. So we can actually compare it or actually, meeting the benchmark, so meeting the performance standards that we actually set from the very beginning. So in short, you're right in saying that, there's like performance measures on, our investment returns.
One of the things that crossed my mind is that I hear that we have other work to be done in terms of the fire stations. That's going to take X amount of dollars, and I don't think we really have to determine what that dollar amount is going to look like. Really, I think we have past assessments of it, but we don't have anything, I think, current that has really substantiated the numbers. And so I'm wondering, should some of that, do we really need to have some of that kind of laid out initially in setting up this plan, or are we looking at as we find that information out and go in and readjust our return that we might be looking for at a certain period of time?
I guess if I don't have
Well, I can talk a little bit. First of all, we're working on a capital replacement fund with finance committee. Yeah, if I was gonna give you a ballpark right now today, I mean, it's at least $150 million. Yeah, that we should have set aside in the capital replacement fund. Almost nobody has a fund like that fully funded. But that will be part of the strategy as we work through Elaine and with our new finance folks on how to develop a long-term plan and figure out cash flows for example, this project here will probably, you know, if we moved on it soon, will not break ground for 3 or 4 years. It will be maybe a 3-year process. So trying to figure out the cash flows for that, what our funding is. You know, that's one of the things that we're also going to do with the facilities ad hoc committee is create a 5-year and strategic plan for what our facilities plan is in the next 5 years. And then also with that plan is working some of the design efforts, you know, should we move forward. But I mean, that will be part of that cohesive strategy that we work with our investment advisors on. What's that look like? Where can we put that money and maximize that? And how do we also make some decisions on whether it makes sense to put the monies in one place and float some bonds or to pay on cash or, you know, that it's just a matter of calculus to figure out what makes the most sense.
It's also probably worth stating the obvious that our investment returns alone are not going to cover our capital needs. So the financing side of it will come into play down the road, but yeah, certainly what rate of return we can expect over the coming years on excess cash is important for the board to decide whether to retain that cash, whether to continue from past practices, the CalPERS pay down of the unfunded liability, or whether we should retain that because we can get such a high rate of return on that money, better than what we get by paying it off. So having the combination of the capital plan that the chief's putting together, combined with having an investment manager giving us projections of what we can expect on as far as a return against whatever risk tolerance and benchmark that we're working towards, is going to be the critical inputs that the board will need to make very educated decisions on a continual basis to solve the very problem that you're pointing out, which is we have huge capital needs that are unfunded.
It's basically the new financial planning for the
Yeah.
long term.
Yeah.
Really put it, long term and the short term stuff. Any other comments? Public comment, no? We'll do that, the public comment.
We have none.
Right. So then let's do a roll call, please.
I don't think we had a second.
Yeah, Gary said.
I think.
He first did it. Who was the first then?
I moved in, Robert.
Robert seconded, sorry.
Got it.
Reversed.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solana,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye, that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 9, discuss plans for employee mental health and wellness efforts. Chief.
Thank you, Director. This staff report is a result of some conversations we had during our last Human Resources Committee. And as I think we're all aware that both the board and internally, we developed some goals for the next year that revolve around this. I know on my 2023 goals, one of my items that was listed was focus on mental health of our first responders and staff, and the board's goal number 7 was improve mental health awareness and services within the district. What I wanted to do, because this is kind of buried a little bit in the budget, is just highlight some of the asks that are going to be coming in our next item, which is potential approval of the preliminary budget. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've asked for some enhancements on in our wellness budget. So there's 3 areas in particular that we're looking at. A lot of this has been done through some conversations with Lieutenant Chief Calvert, this is his passion project. But one of the first areas that we're going to do, where we're actually talking about adding some additional resources, is that first one that's involved. It's maintain an annual health and wellness screening program. That one right now, we currently have a contract with Kaiser. And we have an RFP that is out right now for response, and we're looking at replacing the Kaiser Wellness Plan with a newer the current plan that actually deals with whole health. It will be mental health. It will deal with the regular things that are, that will meet NFPA requirements. But then it will probably also add some additional elements, like I said, mental health. Some of it's going to be nutrition, some of it's going to be physical fitness, some of it's going to be some sort of screening for cancer. Usually it's done with an ultrasound device. That's not what Kaiser does right now. There's a number of organizations or companies out there that are doing that right now. Contra Costa County has a contract with a group that does it for all of their employees. I went through that in my last organization with my union president to kind of check it out. So we're looking at something like that. Two things that will do is it will help us detect early, hopefully, anything that's going on. Obviously, firefighters have a higher predominance of cancer. And so the earlier we can catch them, the earlier we can treat it, hopefully catch it. Part of it should reduce workers' comp costs, but it also really lets our employees know that their health and welfare is valued by the district. The second area that we're focusing on is that one there where it says provide preventative and rehab support to education, training, and professional services at no cost of the employee. Right now, we have a contract with Thank You Sutter Health for our ERP services. So we're looking to augment that. It's a pretty basic plan, but it's a challenge to find trauma, professional mental health professionals that are trauma trained. The number of visits are limited. Trying to find therapists post-COVID has been a challenge. There's been so much need and demand. So we're looking at adding a program similar to what Santa Clara and Oxnard have. And that allows employees to go out and self-select a therapist and just come back and get reimbursed. And that will hopefully that's still a work in progress, but that's kind of what our gold standard would be. And then the third would be basically to upgrade our peer support training. It could be after a significant incident. It could be just something on the job, almost unrelated to an incident that can cause a trigger in an employee. But we have peer counselors. We use them for critical incident stress management. You'll hear it's CISM or CISD, but generally what we find is that our rank and file folks are usually more interested in reaching out and talking to peers rather than somebody like a chaplain or sometimes maybe an outside professional or a really person. Oftentimes these programs, we will allow the employees kind of to vote in who they want as their peer counselors. It's very, it's kind of one of those things. It's really an honor to be selected for that. So usually what that means is that people have some trust in you and are willing to go and speak to you. So we're looking to provide the peer support training has been around for a while. There's been some improvements and enhancements you'll see in there. Chief Calvert has put it in there as peer support 2.0, but that's going to require some additional training for our peer counselors. So we're looking to enhance that. The total increase in expenditures that's included in the proposed budget tonight is an additional $226,000 in there. Some of it is related to overtime to send our folks to the peer training. A good chunk of it is going to be in the form of either contract services or basically like through the reimbursement for professional services with a mental health professional. With that, I just wanted to highlight some of the efforts that we're moving forward this year to kind of address both of our goals of taking care of our folks, especially as it relates to mental health wellness as well as just their just physical wellness. So with that concludes my report out. I'm happy to answer any questions. And yes, sir.
Rob?
Do you have a fitness coordinator or that designation?
So Joey Fagoni is kind of the lead on our Pure Fitness program. As far as helping us. I know I get every Sunday an article to read from Joey on fitness, but They do internal training, they help us select the right equipment for the gyms. Things like that, but yeah, this captain going.
I'll think of one more.
Yeah, please.
As the annual physical. Are they now doing that or
We do have Kaiser physicals right now.
is it annual?
It is annual, right, Francie? Our Kaiser physical is annual, yeah. So we're in the process of doing that. I know they did blood draws on all of us a number of months ago, and part of our challenge is getting appointments and coordinating with Kaiser right now. Not awesome. So, which is why we're looking, at a new vendor. But yes, we do currently have a program where we do blood draws and then this.
So we're using Kaiser as our medical evaluator. So let's say there's an issue that comes back with the annual physicals. There's a thorough done.
So right now, the annual physicals is voluntary. The employees can opt to participate or not. And whatever results they get from their Kaiser doctor is confidential between them. They want to share it with us. Perfect, but yeah, that's what we try and do to encourage us. We're not gonna do anything to place them off duty or whatever, and that's.
Chuck?
Yeah, I just a plug for what I think is the major health threat to our staff, which is sleep problems. I've read a number of articles that say that that's the biggest threat right now to firefighters is coming from being up overnight and from overtime that extends that. It's a taboo subject in terms of our staff, and I don't think they want to discuss it, but I think I hope we could open a discussion about shifts. I mean, you don't find police agencies that have the kind of shifts that our firefighters have. And we could do better in terms of the health issues around sleep. So I hope you will broach that subject when you can with representatives from the staff.
Thank you.
No, I'm thrilled to see the focus on mental health, critically important for first responders.
This is basically just to, just to accept the report. So any public comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, so number 10, item 10, just adopt our resolution, the district's fiscal year 2023-24 preliminary budget and full-time equivalent staffing issue. Elaine. And probably the chief in plans to.
So it'll be a combination of all of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we brought a glimpse of the preliminary budget to the board last month. I know there was a number of comments related to it. So with that, we are back before you tonight, looking to have approval to approve the preliminary budget and the FTE staffing. Over to that, I will turn it over to Elaine, and I'll let Elaine lead us through this.
So basically from what we presented in last board meeting, if you see on that attachment B, I believe that's page 400. So this actually summarizes, the changes that we made from the initial preliminary budget that we presented last April. So for the general fund, there is actually a total of 372,000 increase in the budget, which is comprised of, the following listed on the notes below. A part of it is, the addition of, one FTE for mechanic, basically. So that costs around like 163,000. And then the rest are like increasing contract services and materials and supplies. For facilities, there's the $100,000 increase for contract services based on, the current experience that we have right now. We're experiencing, a lot of, maintenance and repairs, and we're expecting the same amount, or at least, more than that for the next fiscal year. And that's the reason for the $100,000 increase. The $94,000 increase for financial management program is related to the property tax administrative costs that the county is actually charging us. So I think twice a year, I think it's December and April. When they send out, the huge chunk of our property taxes, they actually got, some sort of like money or funds for administrative costs. And basically this 94,000, increase is, just to actually, align, the current, service costs that they are charging for us. So that's basically, the reason for the increase. And then the rest are, the $4,000, it's like $4,000 materials for supplies, budget for cadets. This was inadvertently, it's excluded in the last, presentation for the budget, so we're looking at adding that. And then the region communication, there's just, an additional demand for, some supplies to actually install and install the new. And then, on page 401, there's a 120,000 increase for, our capital improvements project. Capital improvement projects fund, and that's, related to, the warehouse generator. So when we initially presented, the estimate for that specific project, all of those, installation and service costs and additional equipment that needs to be replaced were not included as part of that budget. So now we're adding it. So we now have, a more, a better, estimate of, what that project will cost. So that's the summary for, the changes in the budget.
So we can go through and do what we did last month, but we're basically looking at directions. Maybe it's best for us to entertain questions or comments on specific items, unless there's a desire for us to address any specific issues. We don't want to be redundant and repeat the same things. As Elaine has highlighted, we made some changes last month.
And I'll take the motion so we can get the discussion going. Here are motions to adopt our resolution of district's fiscal year 2023-24 preliminary budget before we have a full staffing level.
Move that we adopt the resolution.
Here, a second. Move the second, now let's open it up to discussion. Any discussion?
I have lots of discussion about it, but,
Which is, should bring up what we want to highlight. And this is the time to do it.
I sent this, because it's only known to the directors, but I sent a letter to all the directors with some of my comments about the budget. I asked that it not elicit any back and forth discussion. Because I didn't want to violate the Brown Act. So I think the directors are, hopefully, if you read what I sent, there are some of the objections I have. I was very disappointed in the budget in terms of how it's presented. I feel like we backtracked on some progress we've made over the last 5 years in terms of the expression of this. I think the insistence on comparing the budget with last year's horrible budget. We knew it was horrible. We had no finance person working for the district. We had $75 million in expenditures. This year, we're proposing $69 million in expenditures. That and I said, well, that's less than the budget from last year. Sure, it's less than the budget, but it's more than what we spent, what we expect to spend this year, which is $65 million. So there's $4 million more in expenditures. Plus, we don't have $6 million worth of fire apparatus that we bought last year. So this budget is $10 million higher than what we're going to spend this year. And all we say is, oh, it's a decrease, it's a decrease, it's a decrease. And the nicest thing I can say about that is that it's a lie. It simply isn't true that this is a decrease. So that's one problem I have. The fact that our overtime is well over $8 million and going up 5% or whatever it is, That's obscene that we've got $8 million worth of overtime. We used to have $2 or $3 million and we complained about it. And so we hired more people. Oh, when we get more battalion chiefs, we'll have less overtime. But we gotta give the battalion chief something to do, so they come in on their days off to do work for the district. And it costs us more for overtime than before we had them. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. We have overtime for the human resources department that's almost as much as we have for suppression. Why do we need overtime for human resources? It's ridiculous. Administration has overtime. Ridiculous. And the one person, the community engagement person who you would expect to be doing nighttime meetings or weekend meetings, has a very low rate of overtime. It doesn't, similar to the IT department, very low rate of, compared to their salaries, 2% for the engagement manager. I mean, here we're trying, I think we should be providing some leadership, and instead we've got the admin and we've got human resources leading the pack in terms of overtime. I think the whole thing is just riddled with junk. We've got slush fund in here. We're still budgeting for people we don't expect to have for the whole year, which creates a slush fund. And now we're explicitly putting in a $200,000 slush fund because maybe the chief doesn't have enough money. As if the board has ever denied a worthy thing to the chief. The whole thing is wrong. And I don't know how to say it. I mean, I'm trying to be as, how should I say, as civil as possible in what I'm saying. But this is just wrong. It's a bad example, and I want nothing to do with this budget. I have lots of little questions, why about this and that, but with all the garbage in here and with all the misleading information, the falsehoods, all of that, I think it's just really a travesty, and I'm very disappointed in it. So that would be for my comments. I don't have anything more to say about it than that.
Chief, I want to address some of the concerns, you don't have to, but.
I think it would be great. I mean, I don't know, Director Bernstein, if you'd like to meet offline, but I'd be happy to sit down.
There's nothing to read offline about it. I've made my points. Okay.
Any other comments? Public comment?
No.
Elaine, do you want to say anything?
Can I just add, I do have one suggestion. I'd like to see this thing rewritten completely. And that would be if I had a positive suggestion, that would be the one positive suggestion. That'd be rewritten, that we have a meeting to go over it in detail, and that we do the job that I think this board is supposed to be doing in terms of managing at the budget level, which I think by putting in this meeting information, it's really hard to do that. But so that truly is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, so the only comment I make is Rob should jump in on this as well. The finance committee did spend time, kind of working on the budget, and there's a few things worth noting. One is that there was a conservative approach relative to potential revenues. That was guidance that the finance committee did provide staff. It's, there's variability in what the revenues could be, but given the economic climate, given at the time this budget would be prepared to slow down in the housing market, the direction was to take the more conservative approach. I'd also comment that just on the staffing levels, we're entering a period of time where a much higher percentage of the positions are actually filled. And it's been my experience that budgeting, because that's predominantly where the gap is in excess funds is coming from headcount. And two things I comment on. One is, from my experience, standard budgeting is you budget for what your end of year headcount would be expected to be. That's a normal budgeting process in public agencies and in corporate organizations. Secondly, it's my understanding that there is a policy that the chief has. He can explain it better than I can, but there's a policy that prevents moving essentially money that's allocated to headcount to use on other operational purposes. In other words, headcount budget is allocated to headcount. They can't take an excess of $3 million there hypothetically and go apply it and say, well, we'll go buy 2 new fire engines because we have $3 million extra. So there are some internal controls that prevent some of the movement of the money around. And then, just the last thing I mentioned, you kind of touched on the chief's $200,000 slush fund. I don't think of it as a slush fund as much as, in a $75 million budget, giving the chief a couple $100,000 for unexpected things that do come up periodically and don't have time to come back to the board, and empowering him to address those. The percentage of our total spend in the year, that's not even a rounding year of the total spend. I think it's perfectly normal. I think it's perfectly acceptable. So I'm actually, having been through this, pretty extensively in the finance committee and outside of the finance committee and discussions with staff, I'm actually comfortable with the budget as it's proposed as a preliminary budget.
So, Rob,
Yeah, I seen your memo, Chuck, that you're mentioning that we have a special meeting to go over the stuff, what we did last year and go through each of the individual items.
That's what I was recommending, yes.
Well, the thing that actually bothers me is that, we have one member of our board that has issues with the current budget, and he's making a request to have a separate or special meeting. And maybe like the chief said, like we did last year, go through these items and have a full discussion on it as a special meeting.
Rob,
Well, I think.
oh, sorry. Oh, I thought you, I
I-
thought I heard you say something.
Yeah, over the years, sometimes I just kind of get things. But I thought somewhere either last month or the month before, we went through and looked at the budget, and there was comments that was made, and we also chief to come back, Alan, to move the budget for next year, and that anybody had any comments to let folks know. And so I'm a little disappointed that process the comments that are now focusing has not been addressed with the individuals that like Alan and the chief before tonight. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I thought we had this conversation in the last one and the before. So in order to do the process, did I misunderstand? Did I forget something, or am I imagining that took place or did take place?
Chuck,
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay.
Every single comment that I made in my letter was made at the last meeting. None of my comments in this letter were new. It's just that for whatever reason, nothing was changed in the budget, but I made the same comments before. So I am reiterating the same things that I've already made.
It seems to me, maybe this is me, if you make those comments at the last meeting, I assume that somebody's writing notes, looking at those notes. But I think I think you have specific questions around specific, like overtime. In terms of what I thought I heard, that a main concern was 8 million, whatever the overtime budget is. But then, I don't know if you directed that, talked to the chief about the rationale, and I think it was given you in this budget, the rationale for how overtime is calculated. Now, if those numbers calculated based on some reason, some fact, then the number is what the number is. You expect the number, you cut back services of the intent. So I think it seems to me that if there's you know, specific things, so one item on that overtime is we talk to the chief, I think that's where that all following conversation need to take place, and, you know, or does it need to take place right now, it's to tell you what it is, because I'm assuming that based on his 25 years of experience in this business, he knows what, and he's been around for over a year now, and knows what it's gonna take to perform at the level that we perform with the type of services and budget that we need. And I think you speak pretty words in your mouth, but I don't know, but somehow, if that's the case, then what is it about that other than it's too high based upon some number that you may have in mind that's too high? I haven't heard any concreteness of why, why is it so high? Other than it's just too high. That's where I'm having a hard time kind of wrestling with.
If you're happy with $8 million, I mean, that's it.
I'm happy.
We've got a total budget, we've got a total expense, what do we call it, salary budget of, again, what was it, 50 million or something like that for salaries? And $8 million is like 16% of it. I think that's an extraordinarily high level. And but if you're happy with it, then you're gonna vote for it.
Well, yeah,
This is the preliminary budget.
No, this is the thing we're gonna publish and to people. This is gonna be put out there to the public.
So maybe I can go through, because it's now feeling like it's important to offer some comments, and it might resolve some of the issues. I think that the overtime issue, I can offer some explanations. It's one of those costs of doing business, but if I can just start with, I'm not on any page right now, it's just addressing some of the issues. One is related just to the conversations about revenue projections, right? So at our last board meeting, we talked about those. We met with the finance committee and came up with what were more aggressive than we've been in prior years, but still conservative. Director Bernstein expressed his dissatisfaction with that, and that he would prefer to be very aggressive and try and get them right on, like with our ERAF monies. But yeah, the position that the finance committee had supported had been that I asked Director Bernstein was, I would look for a direction from the rest of the board as to whether we should. There was no comments, so perhaps what I could have done better was communicate with Director Bernstein in the meantime, like, hey, we haven't made any of these changes. This seemed like it was more direction. Unfortunately, I surprised you. My apologies for that, Director, on that. But again, the revenue projections are best practice for local governance. It's very consistent. We chatted with Mike Gallagher the other day. He said that they budget for 50% of the ERAF. It's very smooth. I mean, that's just on the revenue side. On the presentation side, one of the challenges, in an effort to be more transparent and provide some additional information, we added a column this year that shows the estimated actual expenditures. What that causes is general budgeting is you compare prior year budget, current year's budget, and the difference is the difference. In an attempt to be a little bit more transparent and show you what our actual expenses are, has created some, I think, some confusion and also some dissatisfaction, because now it looks like things aren't so accurate. And typically with both revenues and expenditures, we over budget, right? You don't create a budget where you're gonna generally have to go back to the board and ask for more appropriations and get a little bit of cushion. So again, that we can improve on the process moving forward, but those are some of the comments related to that. A couple comments on overtime, especially related to the amount that's in district administration. Director Bernstein, I don't know if you recall, but last year during our big budget mess and a lot of commentary on overtime, I actually made a move to reduce our overtime budget by almost $500,000. And I did that by cutting program overtime by, I don't remember, it was 240,000. And then I also moved $250,000 into district administration. The purpose of that was to give our program managers a little bit of cushion and go, don't worry. If you have not budgeted enough, I have some money in district administration, I will control. Come to me and ask for it. As you can see, we spent less than $1,000 out of that 250,000 that we set aside in my budget. That same amount is, we don't have any intention in using it, but again, it's trying to change the culture here. We've had a long history of how we budgeted, of just generally increasing our overtime budget by adding 10% or whatever it is. We're gonna reduce it this year. I'll tuck this money away. We're not gonna spend it unless we really need to. The only person that came to me and said they didn't have enough overtime budgeted was for our radio installations. When we gave $700 something. The contingency that's in there is oftentimes there's unanticipated projects somebody didn't budget for. And it's always, they usually, from my perspective, don't worry, we will find the money for this important project. So that's consistent with my past practice in the organization. It's the money may very well go unspent, but it will be for unbudgeted projects that always pop up, whether it's a consultant, whether it's who knows what, but it just gives me a little wiggle room when somebody comes to me in crisis and say, we didn't budget for this. Don't worry, this is important. We can do it this year. We have some money set aside. The overtime budget in HR, we've increased it pretty significantly this year. We have a lot of recruitments going on, especially our firefighter recruitment. That's going to involve us either backfilling behind people for overtime or paying them overtime on the days off for them to do interviews. So there's a pretty big increase on the HR side of things. But in the bigger scheme of things, yes, our $8 million overtime budget is big. A lot of it we have little control over because of our constant staffing requirements. That mean that when the fire captain calls out sick or take vacation, we have to fill behind them with overtime. So when I look at what creates our overtime, I have a report here with 77,000 hours of time. Some of that, almost 20,000 hours. You know, when we talk about hiring more people and the impacts it has on overtime, just for your knowledge, because the board has authorized us to hire above our actual positions that we have, you know, hire floaters or whatever, we reduce overtime by almost 20,000 hours. You don't see that in the numbers, but in the overtime numbers, because they don't hit it. It's in regular salaries and benefits, but I just wanted to share that piece. And then we end up with like out of our total overtime budget and the number of hours we spend, 67% of those overtime dollars are things that we can't even control. Well, I should say more than 67%. 67% are related to just leaves that people are entitled to take. You know, and then another almost 23% is related to workers' comp. So between annual leaves that people are entitled to that they accrue and workers' compensation, we're close to 90% of our overtime costs. We don't really have control of it. The other 10% are going to be those other things that we talked about, and that's running our programs. That's what I call the cost of doing business, to get people to go to train. If we need to send to water rescue training or urban search and rescue training, we either need to pay the individual overtime for going to that training, or we need to send them on duty and we back them and we still pay overtime. But you know, the majority of the time, it's not individuals like our captains or battalion chiefs coming in on off-duty days to do administrative functions like the facilities, and I don't remember the other projects, but these are, you know, normally just our general costs of doing business in the fire district to make us what we are. And it's, you know, all those training requirements, we have a choice. We can take equipment out of service and provide a lesser service to our constituents, or we have a choice of paying overtime. And Sometimes we do a blend of both, you know, where we have a certain number of resources we'll take out of service on a given day. So it's no cost for us to do training, but at some point in time, we have to also maintain our minimum coverage standards, and we need to pay overtime. So it's, and this is not unique to us. I dealt with this in my last organization. It's just the amount of overtime is pretty significant. As I just pointed out, 90% of it we don't have control over. The other 10% we have some control over, but there's, you know, if we reduce it, there's consequences in what we can do and what we don't do. So I don't know that I addressed all of the concerns. Oh, I know another one had to do, we had a discussion about pulling some of the capital, the ongoing capital expenditures out because it causes us, or like with the engines director, as you mentioned, it makes things look skewed when you have $6 million in engine replacements in your operating budget. So we're working with finance committee on trying to figure out a way where we can present that differently, maybe as a subcategory. So it will help you. I think what both you and I would like to do is see what our operating budget is without these significant capital expenditures. So we really can compare apples to apples. So I know that was kind of a rambling, trying to answer a lot of things. So I'm happy to answer more questions.
Yeah. Let me direct your attention toward page 362 of the budget document. A second. And I want to clarify here too. I'm not in any way questioning the operations or what you're doing, or that you're making efforts to change things in terms of operations. I have a lot of confidence in the operations. None of my comments related to operations. But let's just take district administration as an example here. If you look down at the bottom of the page, there's like 8 or 9 line items there. One of them is overtime.
Right.
So I'm talking about the presentation of the budget. So I'm looking here, our actual overtime in admin in 21-22 was just over $2,000. This year, and you rightly refer to your efforts to reduce that and so forth. This year is expected to be $774. Okay. Last year, when our budget was just wacko, somebody budgeted for $252,800. We only spent $774. So what are we doing this year? We're increasing the wacko amount up to $253,300. And I'm saying, why? What is that doing? So
I will take full responsibility for the wacko adjustment. Last year was, that was, you know, initially when we presented our budget, remember our budget meeting went very late. And I came back in a subsequent meeting with a staff report, and that was really to address the issues related to overtime. And that was that staff report that reduced overtime, pulled it out of the programs, almost 500,000. 240 was just eliminated. 250 is that amount you saw put into the amended budget for 22-23. That's the 250 I put in there to make everybody feel better, like the world isn't ending. I tucked it away here. If we don't spend it, it's going to go into our reserves. And suddenly it was like, and we didn't spend it. We spent $774, right? That's all I've done is continued that same thing. So as people are adjusting to that, it's still there. I don't anticipate spending it. I can't tell you why we increased it by $500. The 250,000. Well, we went from 252.8 to 253.3. I don't know why it's up $500. But the 250,000 is that thing to help me manage, you know, employee expectations after a long time of, you know, these big overtime budgets and people just putting the money in because they're worried about it. I mean, trying to pull it out and say, don't worry, if you have a true need, come in and see me and you can have access to it. So really what it is, it ends up being a placeholder that gives employees comfort. I don't spend the money. I don't have overtime really to in district administration. But it gives a higher level of comfort for folks as we change the culture here. And that money just rolls right into our reserves when we close out the books at the end.
again, I mean, what you're saying is we're putting $250,000 in the budget to make employees feel better.
Yeah.
and Even though we're not gonna spend it, I don't think that's good budgeting practice.
Okay.
Let me show you the other problem I have, just one example here, if you look at page 394. All right, what page 394. Sure. And it's a trivial thing, but it's a good example because it's throughout the budget where we make up a narrative to explain something. So if you look at right under the chart on page 394, there's an explanation of overtime. And it talks about the decrease in overtime of $18,400. And that's because last year's budget was 48.4, this year's budget is 30, so that's a decrease of 18.4. But really, this year we've spent 22,990, almost 23,000. And we're going up to 30,000. So we're actually increasing the money we're going to spend next year. But we've got a narrative. Why are we decreasing it? Because it's due to an anticipated reduction in memorial services participation in the fiscal year. There isn't going to be a reduction, there's going to be an increase, but we're telling people that there's a decrease. It's just a narrative that's false. And
Well, this is the challenge with putting estimated actuals in the prior year. You wouldn't have seen what we actually spent. You would have just seen amended budget from the prior year and our proposed budget this year, and you would have seen 18.4 reduction. And usually what we're doing when we're sitting in the budget room, we're trying to look at our estimated actuals so we can see how it's trending, and we reduce budgets. We don't reduce it to the point where we're going to be snug up against that. We try and leave a little buffer. That's what we did. So in all likelihood, right, we've reduced our budget from prior year budget to current year budget recommendation. We've reduced that. Do I know what the expenditures are going to be? No, we've seen that based on our experience. We've seen the number of requests going down. We anticipate they're going to be lower than they've been in the past. So we've reduced the budget number. Do I expect the number to be $23,000 again? I don't know. I expect it to come in hopefully under budget, but it's a guess, right? We don't know what the number of requests are going to be for us attending memorials. We can just make our best educated guess. If there's something terrible that happens and there's some line of duty death, it could be higher. It could be $5,000 this year, and we've over budgeted. But you know, it's an inexact science as we try and do the budget. We try and do the best that we can. Try and base it based on actuals that are happening in there. We've presented them to you so you could also see those. But that's what guides us in the reduction in the budget numbers, is seeing a trend down in our actual numbers. But the general tendency is to ensure that we budgeted enough so that we don't exceed our budget in these areas. Whether it may be very different than what you do in your business, but it's very common in local government budget.
I would quarrel with that. I mean, I was a budget consultant to the city of Menlo Park. I did their budget. I was U.S. Navy, the Air Force, city of Milpitas. I mean, a number of states. I Westinghouse, Warner Brothers, Tektronix, Memorex, a whole bunch of companies. I've never seen people compare a budget to a budget. I've seen them compare budget to actual, and that's always the measure. You want to know how much more you actually have to spend. It's just, I know I heard Gary say that he's seen this a lot. I'd love to see a single example, but I don't believe that anybody does this. I don't believe it's best practices. So.
Yeah, so I'm in the same place I was before, still supportive of moving forward. There's a few comments I make. You know, one is, I think the inclusion of the actuals gives the board a tremendous amount of transparency as to what's going on. And it's a very helpful piece of data there, even though it does highlight that in some cases, you know, there's a relatively large variation from what was budgeted to what the variation is. But when we talk about a budget for next year, we're talking about forecasting the future. And forecasting the future by very definition is an imperfect science. And when I look at this budget, what I see is, we took, as the board agreed last meeting, and I think the consensus on the board and the committee both was a conservative stance. That was not a voted one, but we talked about it here to Robert's point. And we did give guidance, and there was an acknowledgement of a conservative stance being okay on the revenue side. So we have a conservative on the revenue side, and then the vast majority at a macro level of where there's discrepancy has to do heavily with this personnel costs and the staffing levels. And the staffing levels, to not forecast or not budget based on how we're gonna finish the year on staffing would set us up for a terrible problem next year as well. And so I think the practice that we're using and that the boards, that kind of in this budget about how you're doing your staffing and your budgeting and how where you expect to end at the end of the year, I actually think is correct. I actually think it's the right way to do the budget. And at a macro level, that's where most of the variation is between actuals and budgets. And so the delta on other things for me are not all that material. So I continue to believe this is a well-constructed budget. I believe that it has great transparency. And relative to the board's direction and kind of it's back to Robert's point, the general consensus at the last meeting was that there was consensus around the conservative nature on the revenue side. And then on the capital side, I think there is an opportunity to pull that capital stuff out of there. But I have no problem with that being done on kind of an after action basis. We can improve the budget, we can improve through the course of the year, the capital improvements, pull those out. What did I say? Oh, capital improvements, sorry. Is to pull those out of it for presentation. I think that can be a change that can come later to improve the presentation of the budget. It's not going to change the dollars in the budget at all. It's a presentation thing.
Yeah, looking at a picture, depending what angle you want to look at it, but it's still a picture. Pulling it out, you give you a different perspective of the picture. But it's still a picture. I mean, where you have it now, have it later. It needs to be part of the total picture. Take off one week from the thing. You won't know what it is. You just didn't know the picture.
Well, you're hitting another thing that I think is important, which is some reasonable consistency to how you budget year to year is actually really important, because if you completely change your methodology of budgeting on an ongoing basis, you have no idea what's going on with your actuals versus your budget. Right now, we kind of have an understanding, and it sounds like there's a historical perspective that's consistent with, budgeted high, underspend, budget high, underspend, mostly driven by the ramp on the headcount curve. Changing that will leave us in a situation where transparency will be more difficult on us.
So the question I was trying to look for real quickly, what page in here that shows the total increase in our budget last year to this year?
So that's gonna be on page.
Well, it depends on what we're looking at, right? There's 337, which is the general fund.
337.
Yeah.
I think Elaine will be in your
Table
general
one.
fund
Table one.
budget summary.
Yeah,
General fund preliminary budget summary, which is table one.
so for the expenditure side, so on page 337, so on, I think that column number 4, column number 3 is the amended budget. So that was the budget last year. So the budget last year is 75,552,324. And then the preliminary budget that we'd like to adopt today or tonight is 69,500, which is on column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
But I'm looking for a total percentage increase or decrease.
So
Minus-
minus 3.2%. Here.
So 8.3 from last year,
Down.
Yeah.
down 8.3. So I guess in one respect, I guess we're much better in terms of budgeting from this year than we did last year, but it's gonna be down 8.3. But I guess I don't know if we have a board have a policy of common practice of, whether, how much a budget go up every year or should go up every year or within a certain parameters every year on a certain extreme circumstance. Like purchasing all these priorities, where we go up significantly to that point. But, and I think it's almost like doing an investment, having some parameters that's going to give us a sense of comfort level that we are staying within our means. Even though we might want to buy it this year, we may have to push it off the next year. Whether 8.3 is a typical something we've done every year. I'm sure it happened up and happening down. The words are comfort level in terms of, in this case, the budget going down 8.5%.
Relative to your comment about the staying within our means, if you look above the 69 million, you'll see the 74,982, which is the revenue. The current budget is 5 million below, roughly 5 million below the revenues. So they're coming in.
Also, Chief, I remember the last year when we went through the overtime, and there really wasn't a realistic projection in a lot of the different divisions and different sub areas. And going through this, I can see a realistic amount there. We went over it in finance committee where it wasn't like money thrown into a section. It was a reasonable amount all the time, except the task force 3 or $3 million reserve that we have to hold on to for some reason. But
Do you think it's a reasonable estimate?
well, I do. But the thing that concerns me is that, we have a board member that has a problem with the budget, and he had made a suggestion to have a special meeting on it to go through it together. I think we've already a lot of it through, as Gary said, the finance committee kind of broke down the stuff. But I mean, if one of our members feels strongly about having a special meeting to go through this stuff, I mean, I think he should be heard as anyone else.
First of all, I spent a lot of time looking at it and so forth, and so, I mean, I do put time in the study of it. It's not just an opinion in many cases. I can tell you, for example, by in the revenue thing, which I haven't commented on previously, we were basically budgeting for half of the ERAF rebate. Now, these properties are already been assessed. We already know what the taxes are going to be for the new year. It's already done. So we can call it conservative budgeting by saying, we know it's going to be 7 million, but we're only going to say 3.5. I don't think that's conservative. I think it's sort of misleading. It's diluting. I think in terms of here we are, interest rates are up, returns are up in terms of investments. The size of our cash balances is up, and here we've hired a professional firm, and yet we're budgeting for it getting less than we're doing this year. Is that conservative? Why would we do less? I mean, it seems there's every reason in the world to believe we'll do more. And why does it matter? I think in the end, instead of $75 million, we'll have $80 million in revenue. And instead of 65 million or $69 million, we'll have $65 million. And instead of having a $5 million surplus, we'll have a $15 million surplus. I think our planning would be severely impacted. It makes a difference between whether we should plan to have 15 million or 5 million. I just think it makes a difference. And that's why it's important to me. It's not I'm not talking about operations, I'm not talking about throwing money away, I'm just talking about having a realistic view of what it is that we're doing. Instead of saying, look, more money, oh, look, we didn't spend as much, like we're surprised. In any case, I think the direction of the board is clear. I think I've annoyed at least 2 or 3 of you, and so, I mean, I think your patience with me is run out. But a year from now, I'll be sitting here saying, I told you so, when we come in at $80 million and $65 million. And then you tell me whether we should do it all over again. That's all I have to say.
Any other comments? Public comments, Michelle?
There are none.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. So let's do a roll call, please.
Director Bernstein,
No,
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones, Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Crawley.
Aye. So that motion carries.
I'd like my no to reflect the summary reasons that I gave at the beginning of the meeting. I was beginning with this item.
Thank you.
It's recorded.
Okay, item 11, review and discuss revisions to the board of directors policies and procedures manual. So, Michelle, we prepared this, but I don't know if you want to chime in here, but essentially every year we can make revisions to our policies and procedures. And this is the time of year to do that. So you should have gotten this in your package. And I guess basically we should make changes that we want to suggest and bring it back in June. Or we sit, I guess sounds like we want us to email you the changes and then we will incorporate that into a draft that we'll, discuss in June.
Well, yes, so you have the packet, so hang on to it. Don't throw it away after tonight. And if there's anything that you feel strongly about that needs to be adjusted, then please email me by no later than June 12th. And then I'll present a staff report in June that will reflect those suggested changes. And then you can vote on them, whether or not you approve them. And then the policy manual would be updated with any approved changes.
And you want comments about areas that need revision, or would you prefer us to both author wording
Author.
changes?
Author
Okay.
would be great. Thank you.
And June 12th was your valid date?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just want to make sure I wrote it down right.
Yeah, maybe because we have to get this on the agenda
Yeah.
and in the packet for the June 20th meeting.
Yeah.
Any comments about this? Okay, June 12th,
June 12th.
no later than June 12th. And then.
I think she'll accept them earlier.
Yeah, I wrote in the staff report as soon as possible, but no later than June 12th. So if you know tonight, don't wait on him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our last regular agenda item is to discuss topics for the upcoming joint meeting with the city of Menlo Park. Chief, do you want to talk about that? Maybe that you probably discussed this discussion with the city manager.
Yeah,
Okay.
I spoke with them actually today about that topics. I know, Michelle, when's our meeting scheduled? Next Tuesday?
On the 30th at 6 p.m., Tuesday, the 30th.
So this is, I don't know if we call it an annually scheduled, but a first one since I've been here. I chatted with Justin just to talk about some things that might be of interest to him and us. Emergency preparedness certainly was a topic that have interest in that. He also was interested in talking about our thoughts on the Station 1 project here at headquarters. So for your awareness, they have some interest in providing some kind of emergency water. They've been in discussions next door with the seminary about putting in an underground reservoir, not on our property, but over, I think that way towards the park. And the seminary is open. I think they previously hadn't been, so we are, so no one's surprised by this. I think later on this summer, we're allowing them to drill a test well in the far corner that won't impair our property, it doesn't commit us to anything. But what it will do is, should they find that there's adequate water underneath our property here, it might give us, some ability to have some leverage if they have something, that they're interested in doing, we probably figure it out. So that would probably be part of the topic of conversation here. It's, sorry.
I was, are you talking about them being interested in putting a well there, I guess, right now? But the plans that I've heard in the past were that they were planning to put a cistern there to store water.
Oh, no longer the case, from my understanding. They're talking about a large underground reservoir similar to the one over by the Caltrain station, that soccer field.
Yeah.
And
Across the street from the mall.
Yeah. Yeah, that's their vision for something like that, not on our property.
That's a cistern, I think, isn't it?
I don't know what a system is
A
versus.
cistern is just a,
Yeah, it's a hard time to grow.
yeah, it's the tank.
Yeah.
So that's what has been discussed in the past, and I think Justin was in one of our meetings to talk about this before he became city manager.
Yeah.
I would say, when was that, Chuck, like that, back in 2014, 15, something like that?
Might have been before my time, because. I
No,
don't recall.
You just started. So maybe in 24, that's.
But they were talking about the cistern, in other words, they dig up, line it, and then cover it, so that it would be a water storage place when there was excess water.
Well, in any case, if it's on the agenda, it's something that we can.
Conversation's coming, don't be surprised. It's,
But to be clear, all they're suggesting on our property is a test well.
yeah, they are.
Is to drill down and see if there's water.
Well, and in the longer term, there has not been any expression of a desire to have a bigger footprint
correct.
or impair our ability to build on.
Right.
It would be a small piece somewhere, wherever we strategically want to locate.
Well, assuming we do it.
Yeah.
Right, so that's why it's good. Any other agenda items?
I don't know what else the board might have interest in.
I have one.
I asked Justin if there was any third rail issues, so. I won't know until you guys start listening.
So then I'll go ahead. In light of the Alameda, De Los Pobos, Santa Cruz Avenue discussion that was going on, that had been going on for about the last 5 or 6 years. And in light of the fact that it sounds like Menlo Park wants to put bike lanes on El Camino Real. Maybe we should talk about what their plans are and how we can be included in those discussions, just to make sure that. El Camino is the primary response run, and it should remain that. So I don't know what their plans are. I should do it, like I've been reading in the paper. I don't know if you've put anything in with that, Chuck, but
I thought El Camino was a Caltrain, so we were.
it's
Data.
been in the paper.
Yeah, no,
It's been in the paper.
I'm not questioning it. It'll be interesting to hear their response.
Right.
But it's my understanding that
Right.
it's a county highway
Or
or a state highway.
Virginia,
Yeah, what was that?
chief, you should identify the way we had in the past, all our emergency
Primary
routes,
response run.
primary routes. Make sure that, they don't take the lanes away.
Traffic calm.
Or bike lanes or combination of bike lanes or something like that.
I think that we did have that discussion in one of our previous board meetings where we outlined. Which I think we adopted primary response routes.
But your point for the agenda, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, is for us to be part of their process.
Exactly.
For us to be part of the process versus us reading about it in the newspaper.
Right, because that's been
Which is
part of
every
the
other,
problem,
right, yeah.
right? And so, but we did designate, to Rob's point, we did designate primary response routes.
Did
And I think it was 2018.
also through
So
Atherton.
you might want to take a look at
Actually-
the staff report in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, Atherton and also
And-
North Arrow. North
It's
Arrow.
normally a normal part of city planning, is emergency routes, so.
Was either 17 or 18, Mark, I can't remember, anyway. I thought we voted on. It was maybe 17, when this Alameda De Los Pobos task force was put together. And Alameda De Los Pobos became a potential issue. That's when we designated them. May have been 18, anyway, it was around that time. Yeah, Chuck.
Related to that, but still separate, is the whole grade separation issue in Menlo Park, where
Yeah.
I think 3 potential grade separations. And they're talking about closing one of them in Atherton. Not having a crossing anymore, which puts more pressure on the park. Street is getting close now. It's the one down near the park, over Palmer, that.
Watkins,
Watkins.
Watkins Crossing.
Yeah, I
Take
think,
it out.
don't they have something there now, like a? I think that's like.
But Abington is considering right now, Gary probably knows about it, is considering bike lanes on El Camino also. It's a topic that's.
I haven't heard it come up, but I was not at the last meeting
Well, it's been an issue in the past. I don't know where they are on
when
that.
it predated.
Yeah,
Paying
Right.
attention to it.
I would say probably 2 years ago, that was,
Jen Wilson is proposing it for Menlo Park right now.
that's why I wanted to make sure we're in the discussion.
We'll have to hire extra paramedics if they put bike lanes on El Camino.
Any other topic you want to cover? Any other topics you guys on the agenda? And so that's 4 right there, Chief. Yeah, yeah.
So is the fourth one grade separation?
What was that?
So what they're gonna do with their $28 million surplus.
Put in bike lanes.
Maybe like Chuck said, maybe help with those grade separations.
Michelle, the 4th one was identify our emergency routes.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
El Camino bike lanes, emergency route, station line. I think this is an addition.
There's a grade separation.
So
So I had community preparedness. Primary response, I mean. Anyway, there should be 4, so one of them should be grade separation. You and I have them different orders, but they were at the same. The same. Any other? Issues? So, when are they going to agendize, I mean, do a public notice, like. If we think of anything new before web day, can you review some other suggestions, or, I mean, I think this can be fine, but. Okay. maybe
Sure,
there's
I'm not
anything.
sure. When we established our joint meeting with Atherton, felt like we had our liaison connected with, I don't know if they have it. Director Brinson, are you that?
These.
Menlo, yeah,
Chuck's
I-
amazing. They don't, I don't think they have,
Oh,
Atherton does that one.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, don't even know. And then we need to probably set up another meeting with East Palo Alto too. So, yeah.
That'd be good. I'll reach
Yeah,
out,
to the city
yeah,
manager,
you
yeah.
know, Director Jones. Conversation, see what we're. So.
Okay.
How do you expect the next steps to happen with the joint meeting with Menlo Park? Is somebody gonna reach, are you gonna talk to the
I'll
city
call,
manager?
Justin, or send him an email. With the items that we have on there and see what his feedback is. And I can connect with you both of those. And what you'd like to call it.
Can I just, have you had discussions to ask what they're doing on, where did they just vote to put traffic on Valparaiso? So that, which street do they vote to take parking off of? And put
But that was in the middle.
On Middle,
Oh,
that's right.
no.
Near Safeway, that's right.
Oh, so,
You live on site, yeah, that's right.
but it's near safe, it's
Yeah, we did.
perpendicular to the university and.
Yeah, middle starts at
Oh, community.
the Safeway there in El Camino Real and the Shell Station, between Safeway and Shell Station, and then goes west,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
They were talking about taking out parking, I don't know what it means in terms of primary.
Well,
For me, that sounds good, but.
why, it depends on what they put in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're talking about putting a raised,
Oh, got it. I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, so so I would include that too, because middle, I don't know if we have that.
That's.
Yeah, so middle, that's a pretty big street too for us. Probably between stations 1, 6 and middle. So. I mean, so maybe that's one of that's, if we look at these response rates, that would be one of them. And that actually goes out to our community, which goes to. No, so I,
Most of
yeah.
the properties west of, you come right down middle towards Stanford or anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
I
that's a
suspect
good
they
one.
just go down, you know, cut up middle.
That's a good one. I didn't know about that. Okay, so those are the Alpino Young Middle and. Okay. Then let us know. Okay, moving on to item, any proposed future agenda items?
You were talking, closely, there were evaluation, and there was, on the human resources agenda, there was a discussion of the evaluation
Oh,
forms and so forth. What's the status of that?
so we can give that update in the committee reports.
Okay. Was there a schedule for?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we're gonna go over that. So, okay, now reports and requests. So emergency preparedness.
So EPREPnet, again, we spent the entirety of our time talking about the study session and what kinds of questions. I think well, there's still a little bit more work to do behind the scenes to organize the content and everything. I think we have general consensus that we're probably prepared to move forward with the scheduling of a study session. And so we don't need to do that tonight, but I would just put it on the list of things to do when we have a window of opportunity. I don't think there's a time sensitivity. In fact, I think there's probably some benefit to moving a little bit slow on the scheduling, at least for a while. Continue to let Heather come up to speed and make sure the committee and staff are completely aligned. But we did get more input from the community volunteers and had more discussion. So from a content perspective, I think that's yeah, we had that.
No, just I think we both agreed that the consensus of the whole board was that it should be a board meeting.
Yeah.
And not a committee meeting.
Yeah, that's why I said it was subject to when the board has time to hold that session. But yeah, we correct. Consensus that it should be a board study session, not a committee study session.
Okay. Yeah, we'll work on it. Okay. HR, Robert?
Quickly, there's a couple things that we talked about at Willard report. And I don't know if you guys want to take a look at it or not. I can give you a copy. Take a look at it. So I can tell you do that slide. Thanks to the chair. We had a committee on this, meeting on May 9th. People there was Virginia, myself, and then we had Chief, Francie, and Kristen. Yeah, there. There were three things that on our agenda that we wanted to cover. We wanted to talk about the new internal assessment tool that was brought up at a meeting regarding to test for the DEI. We wanted to look at the how to improve mental health awareness, which the chief has already talked about. And also wanted to discuss the process for the fire chief evaluation. Talk to for the industry board. The things that we accomplished at the meeting, and I'm hoping the president to kind of fill me in some details of the clients. The backdrop was agency, a consulting agency, is called the Center for Human Capital in Innovation, called the CHCI, to help the fire district advance diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workforce within the district. This organization and this company specializes in DEI. We're focused on human capital management consulting services. We're focused on people analytics. And so the work their work dovetailed into what HR committee goal with DEI is. And insofar as evaluating what improvements can be made on make hiring, onboarding, performance, review, equitable industry. The aim of the consulting services to utilize a system of collecting data and understanding the data to improve diversity and equitable tool, talent to tools of the industry. Some of the consulting work we will include providing a detailed narrative, negative summary, which will detail the findings and recommendations for the next step. The group also will provide one briefing of the report to the fire district management and then also to the board. The third thing, which is important, the group will not be collecting information that identify any individual survey taker. It's very important to allow the confidentiality. The group also proposes a 6-week timeline to complete all the work in scope of service. The financial impact will range between any, if they survey less than 100 employees, that cost would be around $3,950. If it's more than 100 employees, then it costs $7,700. So we also talked about health awareness and like the chief guidance and things in plan for this year as well as the year. And we also talked about the process for the fire chief evaluation. And below what you see are dates that were proposed as a process that we go through the chief evaluation, beginning so I guess that's what we need to kind of look at, talk about when we come to the conclusion as to whether that process is what the board wants to see. And in the recommendation that we bring forth to you, to the board for consideration, we recommend moving forward with contracting with the consulting service. From the Center of Human Capital and Innovation Team. And we also move forward for your recommendation on the process for the chief evaluation. Those are the recommendation to the board approval. So on the chief evaluation, for the senior the chief, is there anything that you want to add to the work of the yeah.
You covered it very well. We will be planning on meeting with the consultant on Thursday to talk about the questions. I know that they gave 2 tiers. They offered a discount, so we would be in the first tier to $3,950, even if we exceed 100, which might be unlikely. But the plan is to meet with them to kind of go over their question database, some of our goals in collecting the data, bring those recommendations back to the HR committee, and then implement the assessment.
Really glad to see this. I think it's a concrete step to get the information you need to develop a program. So I think it's a really good move. Nice work by the HR committee.
Well, I would want to give a shout out to Francine and Kristen looking for all of this, because it was, it's been an important issue. So, moving forward with concrete steps and taking the first step is important. And so thank y'all for that.
Can I ask a question on the fire chief's?
Yeah.
Good.
I'm just gonna, go ahead.
Okay, so my only question is relative to kind of the form of input to back to Stephen. You want bullet points, do you want monologue, do you want?
So the board has adopted a form.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna send you that form.
Yeah, it's in the
It's,
policy.
I've updated it with Virginia's permission to change the date from 2013.
Okay,
You can answer it any way you like.
but is there a preference? I mean, would you prefer just short bullet points of the topics or?
I think my preferences are not as important as what you think is constructive and helpful in evaluating your project.
Okay, fine.
I'm not trying to duck the question, you're ducking the question, but that's okay.
Combination.
I'm okay.
I think what is helpful, if I remember the form correctly, there's a space for a numerical range between 1 and 5, exceeds expectations and like differently. But part of the process that the board has asked me to do in the past has been to, average out those numbers.
Yeah.
So if you don't use the numbers at all, but just give me some bullet points, I won't be able to add your numbers to.
Okay.
Composite score.
That's all I was looking for, okay, sounds like you wanted to so you can do your job.
If there were 20 of you, it might be different, but it's pretty easy to compile your 5 comments in whatever form they happen to be.
Thank you.
So I do want to make a comment that was brought up at the meeting was, we are using the same form. I was hoping that we could change it, but in our board policies and procedures, it says that we can't change, the form changes should have taken place by December, so. I think from a procedural standpoint, we're following the board policies and procedures at this time, so when we do these updates. We can look at that, and so next year we might be able to change the form. Or this coming after this, this, well, it depends on what happens here.
Is it safe to say that we don't have to address that question in our comments due by June 12th?
Well, it's in
Because it
here.
sounds like we have to send it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
But
asking
we
what
have to change, but we can change the
It's a pretty
policy.
big project to create a good solid evaluation.
Well, I know, but I mean, this was, yeah. Anyway, so we have an opportunity to change the form by changing this policy. In this, yeah.
Okay.
But in the meantime, this is the process that the HR committee outlined. And actually, instead of the form going out to the entire board today, it'd be 5/17. So I didn't even realize it, but so the first date would be tomorrow, Steve, and it's we'll send out the evaluation form. Is that possible?
It's totally possible.
Okay, 5/17 tomorrow.
Send it out. If you end the meeting soon, I can even do it tonight.
Oh.
That's okay. Well, either way, anyway.
We should have it now.
By tomorrow. So, okay, any questions about the dates here? We were trying to be in compliance with the chief's contract, which said that we have to have his review done by the end of the fiscal year. So that's why the dates are like this, but also we're trying to make sure that, we gave some room for Memorial Day, which is also in here. That's coming up.
So it's June 13th, the in concrete date or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for the special meeting, because our board meeting is June 20th.
So you guys, if you can kind of, if you have your calendar, you can kind of do a quick look right now to see if that day is appropriate, you available to you. What time are you talking about? I think we have to decide what we're gonna need.
Yeah.
Probably still be
Maybe
working
Michelle
until
can give a
maybe
doodle poll.
after, you know,
That hasn't been really going very well.
Okay.
It might be
So
better.
let's do it in the evening, or, I mean, you're working check, so. And I think the 13th.
The 13th date is okay, I just, be better if it were either like 5 o'clock or.
Yeah, maybe start at 5 or 6,
Yeah.
June 13th, it's on this report.
So if June 13th is okay, we're there somewhere around 5 o'clock.
Does that work?
That works.
Does that work?
Is that bad?
No, that's good.
Okay.
So, everybody.
So Gary's gonna be.
I have to double check, I'm sure, I'm not worried about it. Gainfully unemployed, it should be fine.
You're retired. Okay,
5 p.m.
okay. Any questions?
Any questions? Well, just one minute, so I can do the whole thing. Would it be in this room or would it be like 170? I mean,
170.
Probably won't sit down. So this is gonna be really the only item. It'll be a special meeting probably. Michelle, is that-
It'll be a special closed session meeting.
Yeah. Personnel. Robert?
Can we get the chief outside? So that we can call them in.
Okay, finance, Rob Solano.
Finance, well, you know, we went through the PFM, Asset Management Investment Advisory Services. We went over the capital improvement projects plan. We discussed the annual adoption of district investment policy. So we pretty much went over all the items that we got in the plans. Whatever you want to add.
No, I think just on the capital improvement plan, I think the chief is revising that for sharing with the board next
Right.
meeting, is that current plan?
Yeah.
Take it back to finance and move to the board.
Yeah, right. So by next board meeting, we should have that longer term capital projection.
But was that a handout at the meeting? The capital? Because I don't think it was in the packet.
No, there is a draft that we were working with to get comments back to the chief on, and then he's going to take the commentary from the finance committee, finalize it. Yeah, it's based on what we're 7 years working on.
Chief, could I get a copy of
I
the?
have one, I'll give it to you. I have one in my folder.
Okay, thank you.
It's really, Chuck, just to set up the expectation, really in the spirit of projecting the future. Some of these numbers are, yeah, I think it's safe to say are wild guesses, but it puts a number on paper, not wild in the sense of, you know, grabbed out of a tree, but you know, we're making projections on future costs, which is hard to do years in advance.
I used to hear it, I say, have you given consideration the all the reports that have been done for a couple of years around assessment and
Right, I use from that's one of the age of the buildings and.
Yeah, you'll find it to be an interesting report because they'll have station 4 replacement in it. Yeah, which sounds strange, but the reality is we should be setting aside capital for the future replacement of it. And the way I characterize it, it kind of feels like a homeowners association report, which is how do you maintain the facilities of a condominium complex? It kind of looks like that. Right.
Anything up in chat?
Yeah, I just, Rob had an extra copy, so he gave it to me, but it's not an important one, but when I was going through the budget, it wasn't clear to me, that line item called fixed assets, it wasn't clear to me, and we don't have to discuss it, but I just, at some point, I'd like to sort of understand, those fixed assets include buildings, apparatus, and the capital items like,
SCBA.
SCBA and stuff like that. Includes
Yeah,
all
those
of it.
are obviously significant ones. I mean, because I'm sure we have other fixed assets that are in the budget that aren't set out like that. So I don't know what the threshold is because the one generator that's in there is significant versus vehicle replacements that are also fixed assets.
So when you're talking about doing a capital budget, are you talking about all fixed assets or just some of them?
Some over 200,000.
Over 200,000, okay, thank you,
That was,
okay.
Anything else, Rob?
Sorry.
Anything else? For finance?
Oh,
okay, thank you. Okay, liaison reports, Tom Babbage and Gary.
I was unable to attend this one, so I don't report.
Robert, Ms. Paul Watson.
spoke to chief about speaking to the city manager and spoke to chief about speaking to the city manager about setting up a meeting.
So that's happening.
And specifically, the city manager wanted to not initially have a full-blown board meeting, but have a representation of the board or no, the district, like, the chief and I talked about maybe just the chief, myself, liaison, and someone else. They can affect the agenda, honestly, what the agenda to do
For the joint, meeting.
for the joint.
but they want to have a joint meeting.
Yeah, they would.
Yeah, okay, but for the agenda set, yeah. Okay.
By the way, after, sometimes I forgot to say, they do meet tomorrow, so.
Okay.
Tomorrow's meeting, so if anybody has any after concerns, just drop me a quick message.
Okay. Is that it for East Palo Alto, Robert?
Yes.
Okay, Menlo Park, Chuck,
I don't know.
San Mateo County.
Oh, well, I found out that, the mayor of EPA is running for board of supervisors. Yep.
Oh,
Lisa's running for board of supervisors. And basically, that's all I have to report for the county. And, you want me to do the pre-med?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're the next one too, because it's tomorrow, right?
It's tomorrow, right? And, thing that she said he was gonna get on the call. What I'm concerned about is the CAD system, and Chief and I have discussed it, the CAD system and the tablet system, where we want a common platform with the communications aspect for our fire services and with AMR. I saw the agenda and I sent you the agenda sheet that they had sent. It looks like it's a mixture of a bunch of confusion. I don't know if they're gonna get a quorum, but
They haven't canceled the meeting. right?
not yet.
Okay.
But it's, well, it's tomorrow at
I know.
6:30, we may get a call at 6:25. And what was the recommendation for the communications policy?
Is this the dispatch? The dispatch?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What was that?
the delta that would make them whole is a little over $4 million more dollars.
So it's 4 million?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Like 4.2.
And we had talked about PG&E information that we want to put in the CAD system. Because they had that Don Matei that 3 hours later, I remember his name. I said that and he had signed the home arm list with PG&E to share the information. So the county should be able to share it with us. Definitely within our district, because they are dispatching. Yeah, I think
Right.
that was a big issue at the EPA meeting. Where they were complaining about PG&E. There were a lot of people that came up there and said that, they needed additional services because of the medical conditions. And, I think we need that in our CAD system so we can respond to those people. And, do you want me to continue?
Oh, I mean.
I went to the preparedness fair. I saw
Oh.
Robert there.
So report to your request, so
Oh,
yes.
I was just gonna roll.
Go ahead, roll.
And it was on April 29th, and it was really well done. I saw Robert there. And PG&E was there was FEMA there, OES was there, even the water department. Yeah, Robert did a great job putting them all together. And he was at the Latter Day Saints Church. So it finally had everyone together that needed to be, Menlo Park Brady, your group. It was well organized and put together. So,
Mary George, that's Mary George, she's with
with the church.
the church, yeah, and also if you remember like that too.
Oh, wait, yeah, okay. Yeah, that was there, and we had the drones and stuff, so. It was well organized, too.
Chuck?
That's all I was.
I went that late, but it was, yeah. But the week before they had one, then when I was in high school, which was, really a celebration of birthday. More, so it had a lot of, plant-based foods and things like that. But there was a lot of, information about electric vehicles and electric generating, things. It was very expensive, and John Johnston was there and so forth, and booth and Menlo Park, DC Ready was there, and Atherton group was there, and they had really hundreds and hundreds of people, much better attended than the one in the park. It was really good. It was huge.
Robert?
I'll stop there tonight.
Very.
Nothing else for you.
Okay, thank you. So I have for presidential report. The chief mentioned that we met with the county chief executive, Mike Callaghy. I actually asked Chuck to be involved with the meeting as well, but he couldn't make it. It was kind of like a last minute request as well. Sorry about that, Chuck. But basically it was to talk about the dispatch issues. Because, you know, they want the ad hoc committee being formed. So I guess we'll find out tomorrow, Rob, you know, our next board meeting, what happened at the liaison committee meeting. So we're gonna be scheduling our ad hoc committee with the chief to talk about that as well. I met, the Menlo Park open mic for the mental health thing that you went to on May 1st. Thank you for going to that. I actually got the request from the poet laureate emeritus or emerita, whatever she calls herself, but former poet laureate, San Mateo County. And it was basically a request, basically for mental health. And also this was an event that was done by the Menlo Park Library Foundation. So it just made sense. They asked if the fire district leaders. So I think everyone loved that. But thank you for being there, Mark. And then finally, the chief and Chief Calvert and I met with John Pay, who is the president of the NFL Alumni Association of Northern California. He's been wanting to do some work on mental health issues, and so we just had some ideas thrown out about, you know, what can we do to work with, you know, other tough guys too, like the football players, and to see, you know, there might be a video or something that we can collaborate and basically to destigmatize, you know, mental health. You know, it's a problem and it should be looked at in a different way. So hopefully we'll be able to do some more with John, but we just had one meeting so far. So I guess we'll just probably schedule another one and figure that out. So that's all I have right now. I just want to thank everyone for doing a lot of the hard work, and we had a pretty active month, so thank you. I now open it up to public comment number 2. I don't know if you have any comment.
There are no public comments.
Then I will adjourn the meeting at 10:12. Thank you.
Yeah.